Welcome everybody to the Alternative Sports Show, powered by Verge Magazine. It's me, Matthew Connell, Andre Dixon, and come on, you already know this lady, Semra Hunter, LaLiga TV, back in our lives once again. Semra, is everything all right over in Spain? It's been a dramatic few weeks.
It is. Dramatic is probably the best way to put it. But yeah, we've come through, I think. We've made it through to the other side. So yeah, things are all good right now in Spain.
It's good to hear. I mean, yeah, we're good. Like, it's been fun. I mean, it's fun for me as, a Portsmouth fan, top of League One. I can sit back and look at the footballing landscape and think that everything is all rosy after, 3 games in English domestic football. Of course, the season is so young in La Liga. We've only had 1 match a week so far as La Liga is concerned. But you know what? We have to address the goat in the room, so to say. I like what I did there, the goat in the room.
I like what you did
because, there. Yeah. So, I didn't even rehearse that. That just came out of nowhere. Of course, I kind of feel like after the obvious thing that's happened, we're not going to say, oh, Messi left the PSG and all this kind of good stuff. We know what happened. We've seen it 100 times as the reports. I kind of feel like when I used to go and film over at Barcelona, I used to look at Camp Nou, and the staff would talk about what could happen when Messi leaves. And I remember looking up at Camp Nou after a shoot thinking, this club is doomed once Messi leaves. But I kind of feel like now the dust has settled a little bit, it's not all that bad, or is it? What are your eyes in the ground seeing, Semra?
Talk about dramatic, Matt. Doom and gloom.
Set the scene.
What is
Set
this?
the scene. That's what we're here to do. I like to sensationalize stuff. That's what we're doing now. Taking tips from TV.
No, I see your point, and it's true. I think a lot of people from the outside, especially Barcelona fans outside of Spain, saw things in a very different way. You have to understand people here locally on the ground in Barcelona, the Catalan fans who have been going to the ground year after year after year, who are very much invested and engaged in the day-to-day of the club. They've been looking at things from a very different way for a while now. I think we all knew sooner or later Messi was going to leave, whether it was going to be this summer, whether it was going to be a year and 2 years. I mean, he's 34 years old. So at some point he was going to have to leave the club because Father Time, unfortunately, the clock runs down for all of us and he can't play football forever. So there was already kind of this opinion brewing amongst some of the fan base here in Barcelona for a while now, who felt that maybe it wasn't the worst thing in the world for him to leave now. And there were several reasons for that. One is obviously the economic reason, that now it takes some of the weight off, because it turns out that the financial crisis that they're in is so much worse than we all originally thought. And Joan Laporta, the president, confirmed as much. I mean, they're so deep in a hole in an abyss. I mean, they can't see the bottom. It's really bad. So by not having to pay his wages anymore, that certainly helps a bit. Then there's the footballing aspect of things. There has been this thought within a certain section, again, of the fan base here in Barcelona that felt that for some time now, in some ways, too much of a good thing kind of became a bad thing. That Messi, in some ways, was hindering the rest of the team, in the sense that this was a squad that has been largely built to play around him, to cater to him, to play to his strengths, for the obvious reason that you have the best player in the world on your team. Why wouldn't you do that? It makes a lot of sense. 9 times out of 10, that's the perfect thing to do. And he's someone who, yes, it's true, he's so many times saved Barcelona, whether it's, on his own, through individual brilliance, coming off the bench, if that were the case, whatever. There have been many cases where he has been able to single-handedly save Barcelona. But I think part of it is because the team wasn't prepared or built in a way where it could handle things without him, if that makes any sense. So they felt that, listen, maybe it's better for him to leave now because we can just usher in this new era where you have young players coming through. We can get the best out of other players like an Antoine Griezmann or even a Coutinho now that he's still at the club, because those are players who really thrive in the Lionel Messi position. And so now what we've seen in match day 1, which I think is something that you're alluding to, we've seen a collective effort from Barcelona. It's not about any individual stars. It's about a whole unit. It's about the whole 11 players working together in a synchronized fashion from back to front. All of them are getting forward in attack. All of them are getting back in defending. And that's something that a lot of players didn't do when Messi was there. Messi
Braithwaite really with the brace in the first weekend. He certainly had more. It seemed like the supply line. He got more opportunities to put the goals away.
That's a great point, because the supply line pretty much always was looking for Messi, right? And for good reason, again. But now it makes them a bit more unpredictable, because you don't know where that supply is going to go. Is it going to go to Griezmann? Is it going to Braithwaite? Is it going to go to Dembele when he's fit? Is it going to go to Ansu Fati when he's fit? Is it going to go to Memphis Depay? You don't really know. And that's part of the beauty right now with Barcelona, is that they're unpredictable in that final third. And you see them moving around. There's a lot more mobility, a lot more flexibility, a lot more versatility as well. And so, yes, in that sense, things look pretty good for Barcelona. Again, it's just been one match day. But I think it's also a valid point that they went up against Real Sociedad, who finished 6th last season. They're no slouches. They have an incredibly good team. They weren't at their best. And it's worth remembering that quite a few of those players had just got off the plane from Tokyo, from the Olympics. They're exhausted. So they didn't really have any rest or a preseason. So it wasn't a full strength, a best version that we will see later on from Real Sociedad. And still, they dispatched them 4-2. So there are a lot of positives, I think. And I do think that there are quite a few players who now feel a bit more liberated that Messi isn't there anymore, and less pressure, because it doesn't fall on just one person anymore, the responsibility, or the fact that you have to play in a certain way for this one person. Now you can actually be a bit more creative, a little bit more open to trying new things. And again, having this sort of freedom to play in a different way. And Koeman seems very, very happy about it. After the game, he said that was the best first 30 minutes that he'd seen from Barcelona in a really long time. So, yeah, I think there are positives, definitely.
Yeah, it definitely, like, for me, like, obviously I've been looking at it from a coverage on the UK point of view. And I think that there's always a bit of spin from the UK, where obviously they're competing league-wise. There's always that promotion of, like, the Premier League is the best and it's better than everyone else. And they've been saying this stuff for a long period of time. And for me, I've seen stars come and go from La Liga, from the time I've seen, if we're looking from Barcelona point of view, if Semra, tell me if I'm wrong, it's like, you go from Romario to Rivaldo to Ronaldinho, and then Messi came along. So there's always the new star that's coming on.
Exactly.
And then obviously, there's not just one. And I think people like me prefer it. I mean, when we first ever spoke, I didn't purposely ask any questions about Messi, because it's boring to me. It's the same person we're talking about again and again and again. So I would like to see if Coutinho could actually fulfill his potential there, because I don't feel like he's had a fair crack of the whip. I don't think it's gone really well for him at the moment. The same thing with Griezmann. Griezmann's an amazing player, might do idiotic stuff off field, but he's an amazing player. So to me, I do think that it's more, La Liga now is more interesting than ever, because now you have teams against teams. If you look at Real Madrid for the last few years, especially when they was winning back-to-back Champions Leagues, it wasn't the Galactico thing. There wasn't bringing in a new star all the time. It was like, let's bring in the new players. Let's bring in the youngsters. Let's utilize what we have. So for me, I feel that if you are actual real football fan, you're not just being, partisan or, tribal for English sports and the English league, then you're going to love La Liga this season.
You brought up two really good points, and I'm glad that you did. And one is, yes, that the whole entire focus on Messi thing does drive me crazy, because, okay, I can understand whether you're a Messi fan or not, Barcelona fan or not, given the magnitude of who he is, it's totally understandable why it was such a big deal. And it is a big deal. There's no question about it. I mean, he's the best player in the club's history. He's one of the greatest players of all time. I completely understand why. But it does drive me crazy, this idea that Barcelona won't survive without him. And it's exactly what you just said. They've had stars come through, icons come through time and time and time again. Yes, he was the greatest one, perhaps, of all of them. But this is a club with a very, very rich history. It's been around for 100 years. They had the dream team, you know, in the what was it, the late 80s and the 90s, that had Johan Cruyff at the helm. I mean, there have been amazing teams and players who've come through, and life goes on, you know, it just does. That's the reality. And they've been able to pick up the pieces time and time again and move forward. And so, like anything, you know, football is cyclical. And so, yes, Barcelona are entering a brand new era and a brand new phase of life. But we could say the same with Real Madrid a few seasons ago when Cristiano Ronaldo left. Everyone, oh, doom and gloom, you know, bad news for Real Madrid, how they're going to cope, how they're going to survive. Well, they're Real Madrid, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that as a way of any disrespect to Cristiano Ronaldo, but it's a club that has survived when they've lost some of the biggest names they've ever had, and they've gone on to win trophies. You know, they won LaLiga. I think they won if memory serves me well, they won the Champions League too without Cristiano Ronaldo. So they've done fine, you know, and Barcelona will be fine. And again, I think one of the other things that you touched on is the youth that's coming through. There's so many exciting young players, What people have to realize is that Spain is one of the best countries for creating young talent. We have some of the best football schools on the planet. And it's not just La Masia, Barcelona, or La Fábrica at Real Madrid. You have Lezama Athletic Club. You have Zubieta, I think it's Zubieta, I can't remember the name, at La Real Sociedad. They have a great cantera. You have tons and tons and tons of great footballing schools. And so a lot of these young homegrown talents are now starting to break into the first team as a consequence of COVID, as a consequence of the economy being so affected over here in Spain. A lot of these clubs are now, rather than trying to loan or sell off these really young talents and prospects, are actually trying to keep them and develop them even further in the first team. And Barcelona, in a way, was an example of that last season. So you have also, apart from players, managers. There's so many unbelievably talented young managers that are coming through because they go through the same process in the same schools as well too. So Spain is a fascinating place for football because it is a very rich place to see different styles of play, different philosophies, different types of players, different cultures. All of this, you know, is on offer across the board in La Liga in a way that I don't necessarily know. I can't say because I'm not an expert in the Bundesliga, for example, or the French league, but I don't know if it's quite the same in those other countries. But for certain, I mean, if you do like football, like you're saying, you won't be bored. You'll be really fascinated by what you see in La Liga because there is a tremendous amount of quality and a tremendous amount of talent too. So,
well, I think that's what the Euros and the Olympics did very well as an advert for La Liga. Because look, Spain with a squad that basically a lot of, and especially from what I consumed through English Twitter, they were like, yeah, Spain hasn't got a chance. Who are these players? They had no idea what was going on. They you know, barely knew what was going on. But then, of course, getting to the finals of the Olympics as well with that squad. I kind of, you know, like we've touched upon youth and the future Barcelona. Of course, a lot of outside of La Liga, there's a little bit of excitement around Pedri. And this is not to make it like a Barcelona show. But I also fear for Pedri because, like you said, life does go on. But life doesn't seem to stop Pedri because he's just gone straight from, you know, this. And again, you got to remember, like, we've just come off the back of like the first regular-ish season post, you know, the pandemic. So that summer before that season was very, very small. We have a full football season. Then it's the Euros. Oh, and then it's the Olympics. And Pedri's already back in the Barcelona squad, back to work. How is this kid going to get rest? I mean, is there any, I don't know, report-wise, is there any signal or structure to give the poor young lad a rest? What's going on?
This is such a great topic because actually the other day I was really, really fortunate. I had Tapi Ferre and Aitor Karanka in the studio with me. And I asked them the same thing. I was like, both of you are managers. Both of you have been in this position. What do you do? Because there's some people are saying you need to give this kid a rest. He's played 74 games in a row now, or something silly like that. You know, he's 18 years old. He's the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going and going and going. But you know what was really interesting? We had a look at the stats from his performance in that game against Real Sociedad. And it turned out that he was, I think, the second player who ran the most across the whole division, a whole match day. And what else? I think he was the second player with the most sprints, something like that. I don't know. Basically, he ran an incredible amount. He completed 95% of his passes. So his passing accuracy was on point. He completed a ridiculous amount of sprints. So in other words, he was in great shape. He wasn't tired at all. So you look at that and you think, okay, so there's evidence that he's actually holding up just fine. Do you rest him or not? And funny enough, both of them were completely at opposite ends of the spectrum. Chappie was like, no, keep going. You know, he's fine. And if he feels fine, normally I talk to the player, I see how they feel, get a sense for, what physically, how they're holding up. And he's like, if he can keep going, keep going. He's 18 years old. He can handle it. And Karanka was like, no way, rest him. Because sometimes players can't protect themselves because they're so eager to play that they'll tell you that they're fine even when they're not. So you need somebody there to kind of tell them, hold fire, just take a few days off, rest, whatever. So it was fascinating because they were both completely at opposite ends of the argument and the debate. And they were like, no, Chappie was like, no, keep playing. And then Aitor was like, no, give him some rest. So I think it's definitely something that Koeman will have to watch to make sure he doesn't face burnout if he keeps going and going and going and going. Because even though there's, LaLiga starting up now, let's not forget that there's international breaks every single month for the next 3 months. So he'll be back with the national team too. So he's not going to stop. And presumably he'll be playing with the national team. So it may be a case where if Koeman doesn't measure it carefully enough, he could be burnt out for the last 3 months of the season, because he has basically gone from Las Palmas to Barcelona to the national team, and then one competition to another. At some stage, I'm sure he will be given rest. Maybe because Barcelona took on Real Sociedad at home, it was a tough game at first. He wanted to put out his star 11, which made perfect sense. You want to start off on the best foot possible. They're playing Athletic Club next, which is also another really big, typically difficult game, and it's away at Semra. So my suspicion is that he will play. And then there's Getafe after that, who is going through a period of transition with a new manager and new playing style. So it might be a good moment on paper, a game where he could give Pedri a little bit of downtime. So that's sort of the theory that we all agreed on in the end. That he'll play this coming weekend, but then he'll get some rest in the next weekend. We'll see what happens.
Workhorse. I mean, it's exciting because I can see that even maybe like casual football fans from Spain are starting to catch on to like the wonders of Pedri. Even my partner, she's Spanish, doesn't often care for football apart from when the national team are in action. And fell in love with Pedri. Like, was just,
he's unbelievable.
It was great to see. And for football fans that hadn't quite seen what he had been done, maybe wasn't quite on the radar, of course, then, one to watch as long as he keeps healthy, and fingers crossed he will, be used wisely throughout the season. Nevertheless, of course, the season was won last season by Atletico Madrid. Of course, Barcelona have kind of stole their headlines, whatnot, as we've gone into this new season. Not bad. Well, I don't know. It felt like a very athletic kind of start of the season away to Celta Vigo, who I adopt as my kind of Spanish team I love to follow.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because I'm very connected. Well, it goes down to my partner, because she's from
Is she
Galicia.
from Galicia?
Galicia, yeah. So as of course, Deportivo Coruña.
I was gonna say Depor or Celta, you have to be really careful.
Back in the day, like because we, here in England, we grew up, we knew the wonders of Diego Tristan, and we saw how he was a power. He was an absolute incredible forward. But now Celta Vigo, Iago Aspas, of course, Dre knows very well from his maybe unforgettable time at Liverpool. So I've adopted,
you know what? Can I just say something about that? Because I know people in England, English football fans, are so critical of Iago Aspas because he had a really terrible time at Liverpool. But he's an unbelievably good footballer. He just was not in the right place at all. But not for him. Celta really is a place that it is perfect for him in so many ways.
Absolutely. So that's why for me, as a club, and look, when they were in the Europa League, I think it was the Europa League, they were giving Manchester United a lot of trouble. As a club, what they've managed to do, and they had a kind of a sketchy season last year, but look, they kind of, gave Atletico Madrid a little run for the money. And going back to Liverpool, Liverpool has got an eye for good Spanish talent. Look at Suso, who was at Liverpool. Suso, despite, again, kind of not quite getting it, but when I worked with Suso when he was at AC Milan, he loved his time at Liverpool and spoke so fondly about his time at Liverpool. So there's a lot of great talent. Iago Aspas is still an incredible footballer. Celta Vigo gave Atletico Madrid a run for their money. What's the optimism like for Atleti fans? Do they look at this season now thinking, it's we can kind of storm through it again? There was inconsistencies that made it a very tense finish. Let's not forget it was still very much a 3-horse race.
I was gonna say they didn't really storm through in the end.
No, started quick.
They did until about January, and then they started to wilt.
It did, certainly did. So are they excited? Are the fans optimistic? What are the reports down on the ground over there, Semra?
So I don't know if you've ever heard the nickname of Atletico Madrid, but it's El Pupas, which means the jinxed one. So they are, let's say, quietly optimistic. I don't think they're going hardcore, full in, this is our year, we're going to make it happen again. I think because historically, every time they came so close, something would always happen and they would just lose it at the end, on the last match day or the last 2 match days, something like that. Something would always get in the way that would prevent them from actually going the distance. And so I think they're a little bit cautious because no one in Spain ever really trusts Real Madrid or Barcelona, in the sense that even if they're having a bad year, a terrible summer, things are not going well, the club is in array or is in a mess, whatever, somehow they still manage to grind out results. And so I think they're always a little bit like, okay, let's just hang on for a minute. Let's see what Barcelona, Real Madrid do. So I wouldn't say there's this sort of outlandish feeling of, we've got this in the bag. I do think it was a bit, maybe they were a bit more positive before the season started. And then when we all saw how Madrid played and how Barcelona played, the tune has kind of changed a little bit. And now people are recognizing, this is probably going to be a much more competitive season than we actually thought. And Sevilla, don't forget Sevilla. Sevilla are going to give everybody a run for their money. And there's a very good chance that they go all the way down to the wire. I don't know if they can go the whole 9 yards and win the league, but I would definitely bet that they'll be right thereabouts until the very end again. So I think it's going to be a highly competitive season, actually. I think it's going to be really, really close, and not in the way that it was last season where, Atletico just kind of took off on their own and everybody else was left quite far behind in the dust. I think it's going to be fairly, let's say, even the whole way throughout this season, because everyone's had a preseason. A lot of these clubs didn't travel anywhere on their crazy, let's go to the US or China or whatever. They've had more time to properly train and set it up for the campaign. So I think this is going to be a really, really good season. Really good season. Not just for Atletico Madrid.
I mean, you got to look at as well.
What's that?
You got to look at it as well. No, sorry, I might be in a bit of a lag. It might be me more than the actual machinery that I'm in. But it's for me, I think that you got to also look at the national team whetting appetite for a lot of international supporters of La Liga. And a lot of them didn't know who Pau Torres was, except for any transfer rumors that he's going to be going to Manchester United or anywhere else. It's like, I really do encourage a lot of the UK fans, because I'm quite defensive about La Liga, because to me it's still one of the most entertaining leagues you can actually watch. I feel
really
that
is.
obviously through the national team, this is a young new national team. They're building up a new possible team that can actually go all the way again, because obviously they're only I don't know what you think about the striker situation. Only one decent hardcore killer striker away from being a possibly championship winning team. But before we go into the national teams, I just want to ask about the other teams in La Liga. What clubs do you think could seek? Obviously, we touched on Sevilla, who can actually capitalize on some of the ongoings with or the rumblings with the big 2 or 4/3, because the Atletico is getting a bit older as a squad. Is there any other clubs that can actually seek to capitalize on this opportunity this season?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. I think there's just still a little bit too much of a gap between those 4 and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons why I say that is I think if Villarreal weren't playing Champions League football this season, then I think they could definitely be a contender to give those 4 a run for their money, because maybe they'd be in the Europa League, which is not as demanding as the Champions League. But I think that's going to be really, really tough for them, the Champions League, because they don't have as deep a squads as many of the other clubs. They have a very good squad, don't get me wrong, and they have some excellent players. But I'm not sure how well they're going to cope with the Champions League. I think they can probably get out of their group. I don't know what their group is yet, but I have a feeling that they have enough star quality and enough talent that they could get out of the group. But I think that's going to really wear them down. So I think that will affect them in La Liga more than the others that are also going to be playing in European competition. I may be completely wrong, but that's just my suspicion. I would love to see Real Betis hang on in there, but I think they're going to have a really tough campaign. They didn't really make any moves this summer. They just lost Emerson, who was one of their star fullbacks. I mean, he was already kind of in a 50-50 loan deal with Barcelona anyway. It was always the case that after 2 seasons, he was going to go to Barcelona, and that's what he's done. But they still need a striker. I mean, it's true that Borja Iglesias did finally come to life towards the end of last campaign. He ended up finishing with 11 goals, but it took him like 6 months or something to finally get his goal scoring boots on. So they don't really have anybody else to help out with that department either. So I think they're really going to struggle. They have a great midfield, but I think it's going to be very tough for them to produce the quality results that they need in order to stay in that European fight. Celta could be interesting. I think they have enough talent in that squad to make it into European competition, to finish, let's say 7-6, something like that. So I would keep an eye out on them. But other than that, I hope we have a dark horse. I hope somebody out there surprises us. I'm not sure just yet who that might be, but I do hope that there's an outsider that kind of gets their name in the mix and gets involved in trying to chase down European football. But I do still think, for now anyway, it's those 4 and everybody else.
You know what, as well, obviously we just touched on the international, the national team. Now, I was quite excited because obviously you saw blossoming Ferran Torres and people like that. Obviously, again,
speaking of Villarreal,
there's lots of, well, this is I'm gonna, before I reel off all the players I'm excited for, like, who for you? Obviously, we've got the World Cup coming, in a year. Who are the people, the new young exciting players that we should actually be looking out for now that the overall shadow of Messi has moved away, and now you can get some shine on some of the new ones to be able to get the spotlight now?
In La Liga, for the Spanish national team, you mean?
For
both
the Spanish national team, yeah.
Spanish national team. I think that is, so going back to the point that you were saying earlier, how people thought Spain would be rubbish because they didn't have any big names in the team. That's why it's so important never to write off young talent. And just because you don't know their name, it doesn't mean that they're not a good player, because that's really the case in Spain. There's a lot of players who are just now breaking into the senior national team. So people don't really know them, not even in Spain, to be quite honest with you. A lot of people weren't even familiar with certain players coming into the national team. Like, for example, Dani Olmo, who's been off playing in the Bundesliga. No one in Spain really knew what to expect from him. And he turned out to be one of the revelations of the national team. He was fantastic. So there's a lot that has surprised us. And I think they did even better than most of us thought that they would, because they made it to the semifinals. They took on Italy, but they were by far the superior team in that game. They were just really unfortunate not to go through because of penalties, but they really, on balance, just of the football that the two teams played, they deserved to go through. I thought they were better on that day specifically. And in the Olympics, same thing. I mean, they took Brazil to penalties. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I definitely would say watch out for the Spanish national team, because next year they're going to be a year older. They're going to have a bit more experience under their belts. They're young, they're fearless, and they're very talented. You have Mikel Merino in the midfield, who is sensational. He plays for Real Sociedad. You have Oyarzabal, who also plays for Real Sociedad. He predominantly plays out wide and more of like a number 10 kind of position, or an 8. But he can now, interestingly enough, Luis Enrique was trying him out. No, sorry, not Luis Enrique. At the Olympics, he was playing as a number 9. And that was kind of a revelation. Like, oh, we never really thought of him ever playing there, but it worked really well for them. So he might be able to occupy that position at times. He's very versatile. He can do a lot. But he's an exciting player. And I think he's like, I mean, he feels like he's been around forever, but he's only maybe 22 or 23 years old. But he's been with the first team with Real Sociedad for a long, long time. Dani Olmo is another one I was mentioning. Pedri is the obvious one that you need to watch. Pau Torres, certainly one of the best young central defenders out there. Very good with his feet. He can build out of the back, not just defend, obviously. And I think that's such a big part of Spanish football anyway. Not in all teams, not in all circumstances, but it is kind of a tendency in Spain to build out of the back. Trying to think who else off the top of my head.
Do you sorry to cut you. Do you feel that obviously normally used to be a natural progression for Spanish players to want to play for obviously one of the big two or /3. Now, do you feel because of obviously the financial problems that those guys are having, are people more content, and obviously the spotlight's going to be widened now? Do you feel like there's going to be people who are going to be thinking, oh, I don't need to rush to get to sit on a bench for Real Madrid or Barcelona so quickly. I'm better where I am now.
Yeah, I think everyone is their own unique case. But I do think probably, they figure, listen, if I can go to a place where I'm going to get more minutes and I'm going to develop my game, then it makes more sense for me to stay here rather than take Ricky Puig, for example. He's a perfect example of someone who came through the youth system at Barcelona. He refuses to leave, even though he's on the bench. He absolutely refuses to leave. He wants to try and earn a place in the starting 11 under Ronald Koeman. And I think there have reportedly been offers for him, and he's just not interested. So he prefers to stay on the bench at Barcelona because it means he's playing for Barcelona. Whereas somebody else may not feel that way. They say, you know what? No, I want to play football, so I'm going to go wherever, So sure, I think there's certainly a possibility that we will see a lot more young players kind of popping up all over the place, wherever they can get more minutes. And I think part of that will be helped by the fact that Spain is not making big money transfers. The biggest transfer that was so far, as at the time of recording, obviously there's still like 10, 11 days to go in the transfer market, was Rodrigo de Paul. And he was 39 million euros. So, I mean, we're talking very small sums here in LaLiga this summer. But again, I think part of, let's say, the other side of the coin is that you do have all of these young players coming through who give them a few years, this new generation coming up. It's going to be very exciting. So
nice. Well, this is a great thing, right? We've got a lot player-wise to be excited about. last thing from us, Semra, on the managerial front, is there anyone that maybe is under the radar that, we look at Unai Emery's, we look at what's going on at, of course, at Real Madrid and whatnot. Of course, in the Premier League, we've got new faces like, Patrick Vieira. Nuno has gone from Wolves to Tottenham. So especially for our English audience, any managers that we might be sleeping on that you feel it's going to, they might not necessarily, be breaking the teams into Europe, but maybe we should look out for because their style of play is at least going to make their team sing.
There was one manager who, unfortunately, I don't know what happened actually, but he decided to walk away from the club, and that was Diego Martinez. And he was with Granada, and he took Granada to unbelievable heights. I mean, they had the most epic season of their entire history. I mean, they came up from second division and they ended up finishing in the European places, and they played in Europa League for the first time ever. And he was a phenomenal coach, and he's someone who came through Sevilla, so he is very much a Sevilla man, and he's been very open and honest in saying that one day he wants a Sevilla job. But he was 38 years old, 39 years old, very young, very, very good coach. He did an excellent job in getting the best out of the resources that he had available to him, but he decided to leave. So he's actually without a club right now, but I'm sure wherever he lands, he'll do a phenomenal job. Julian Lopetegui is another example of someone who maybe, how can I put this? I mean, he's had a little bit of bad luck, but at the same time, maybe he kind of jumped too far forward a little bit too early. I think we all know the story of what happened with the national team and with Real Madrid, but Sevilla has been a perfect fit for him. And he and Monchi had this unbelievable understanding between one another, and it works really, really well. I wouldn't be surprised at all if one day he goes to a bigger club as a manager. Because last season as well, they broke all sorts of records with him in charge. And they have a better squad this season. So we'll see what they're capable of doing. Other managers, let's see. Someone I think was underrated is Jagoba Arrasate, who is the manager of Osasuna. I don't necessarily know if he wants to go to the bigger club or if he's quite happy where he is, if he likes being in that sort of mid-level range. But he did a great job with Osasuna. I mean, they had come up from the second division. They don't have a lot of money. They actually, for about 5-6 years prior, were in deep financial crisis. So they had to kind of be creative about how they could pull a squad together. But he did a great job with them. They took down some big teams, took some big results, and they can be fun to watch. Now that Jimmy Avila is back too, they've got Kiki Garcia up front, Ante Budimir. They have a really exciting attack force that can do damage to pretty much anybody's defense. So for me, he was one of the most underrated managers. Who else? Let's see. Trying to think. I mean, you've got Pellegrini, but he's been around forever.
Yeah.
Eduardo Coudet is interesting because he's a manager like no one else in Spain. He has a very different playing style where it's basically all out attack, and they only have one holding midfielder, and Renato Tapia, who, to his credit, has held down the fort so unbelievably well, considering he's had to do it on his own. But that is just pure attacking talent, that side. And it's fun because it's a really different setup and a style of play that you don't see anywhere else. So he's certainly been getting a lot of heads turning in his direction and getting a lot of praise for the work that he's done with Celta. And he's from Argentina. So this is sort of his first really big job over here in Europe. Who else? Yeah, well, more or less. I mean,
it's a pretty solid roster. You think of like the combined experience that, some of these, even like the experienced faces, and the kind of the new wave of managers to light up LaLiga. So it certainly makes a very exciting mix, whether that's the young players, the big clubs that are kind of in a state of transition. I mean, for us, looking at the La Liga landscape, this is exciting. We're about to walk into a new chapter. Like, we shouldn't look at it like, oh, it's doom and gloom. It's like, look, we got to move on.
Yeah.
La Liga is going to be La Liga. We got some incredible clubs, some incredible players of football. And believe me, these La Liga clubs, when they come up to Europe, they're going to give our English clubs a lot of grief. So we should very much.
Look what Villarreal did with Manchester United and with Chelsea. I mean,
come on. Taking both to penalties. No one was giving them the respect. The media wasn't giving them the respect.
No one was giving anybody respect from Villarreal, which really frustrated me a lot. Because it didn't feel right. And it's like, I'm sorry, but you can't, if you don't actually watch them ever, just because they don't have a big name and they come from a town of 50,000 people, you can't write them off. You can't disrespect them like that, you know?
Oh, I think football fans, especially English football fans, are now really I think finally have to get it, and if they don't, they're just sleeping. That Unai Emery is a very, very, very good manager and didn't have the right club. And if you look at the state of Arsenal from head to toe, was it really the manager's fault? I don't think so. And
I don't think so either. And that's the importance of environment in football. You know, it can make or break you, whether you're a footballer or you're a manager. If you're in the right place, you'll flourish. If you're not, you'll wilt. And I think Unai Emery in particular does a much better job when he's working with clubs that have a more of a family vibe to them. Arsenal was more business. It was more of a, more like a company, let's say. It's more run like a business.
Yeah.
Villarreal is a family. It's completely, they're both valid, they're just totally different. And he is better in that kind of environment because he has the support. He has that connection with the board. He has a two-way conversation with them. He's heard, he's listened to. He's, I'm not sure that was the case when he was at Arsenal. So I think that it might have been a bit more disjointed, let's say. So yeah, that's why environment is so important, because most of the time football is, 90% it's up here.
Truth. Right. It's only La Liga's gain and no one else's. So it makes the season ahead very, very exciting. Semra, we're always watching you. You always pop up on our TV screens here in the UK. You're letting the masses know here in the UK just how exciting La Liga is going to be this season. And hey, guess what, buddy? We're just glad that you can drop by, chit chat a bit of Spanish football, and yeah, we're hyped. We're very, very hyped for this season. So thank you as always for generously giving us your time to chat to us two silly little idiots. We hope that as this world opens up. Come on.
What are you talking about?
We're going to play ourselves down. Hopefully, in the near future, we'll, once this world unravels, hopefully we can make content out in Spain, visit some of these clubs. I'm very excited because I go to Ibiza this weekend, and I can see Ibiza plays Malaga, I believe, this weekend. So
that actually be a good game.
So if I can convince the better half of me that, hey, can I go see a football match in Spain? We'll see. I'll let you know if it works out or not. But nevertheless, Semra, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. A pleasure as always, guys.
See you soon.